Hello, Hi everyone, and welcome to the launch of the Including Intersex booklet. This has been a combined project with SHFPACT, Sexual Health and Family Planning ACT, and Agenda in the ACT. We've got a whole range of special guests who I will introduce you to shortly. But first of all, I'd like to invite Aunty Violet to perform Welcome to Country. Thank you, Aunty Violet.
Thank you, Sheridan. It's a pleasure to be here. Ngunnawal, hello, and what a special time to be here and talking about a very important topic, and that will affect the lives of many of our young people. I believe a welcome to country is a traditional Aboriginal blessing, symbolising the traditional owners of the land to an event to take place on their land. And it also shows respect for the first peoples of the land we are mating on. I'm a proud Ngunnawal woman as I walk into the future, teaching the next generations about the oldest culture in the world, the Aboriginal culture. I'd like to pay my respects to my elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect if there's any other Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people here this afternoon online. I'd also like to acknowledge all of you that's online today and that are working on and all launching this booklet. It's something that we really need, and it's something, like I said, going back, that I listened to Noah talk on this subject, and he was really sad, which made me sad that he didn't have the chance to be asked what he really wanted. But let's hope that we listen to our young people in the future. So in keeping the general spirit of friendship and reconciliation, it gives me great pleasure to be here this afternoon on behalf of my people, the Ngunnawal people, who are traditional owners of the land that we meet on today. And Yarra, God bless you all. Take care, because COVID's still around. And if you haven't been vaccinated, you need to get vaccinated for yourself, your family and your community. God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Next part of our launch, we'll be moving on to have a chat to Cody. Cody Smith, well, I'll let you introduce yourself, but I'd love to have a bit of a chat with you first and foremost about why was this resource needed?
So my name is Cody Smith. I am an intersex person who has lived experience of medical intervention and medical violence. I currently work as the Senior Project Manager at Intersex Human Rights Australia, but I did formerly work for Agenda as the Intersex Project Coordinator, and it was in that role that I was able to collaborate on this resource. Which to me might be one of the most exciting things I've worked on as an advocate. I think why this resource needs to exist, there's two aspects to it. There's the personal and there's the community. And my story is one where I had my sort of history hidden from me for a very long time. And there was numerous opportunities where I could have learned about intersex people in my schooling, but because I never had those opportunities, it severely limited what I was able to, my ability to stand up for myself, to connect with community and so on and so forth. So I did not learn I was intersex until I was 17, but I always knew there was something that was different about me. And I can actually go back and find old exercise books from when I was 10 years old, and I wrote stories about feeling like a space alien. If 1.7% of the population is intersex, I went to high school with 1,200 students, and what that means is there should have been at least 20 other students who were going through something similar to me. And it's that sort of support that I missed out on. I didn't learn that I was intersex until I was 17, and I didn't find out about intersex in a school environment until I was studying human biology at university. And so people who weren't studying human biology may never have the opportunity to learn about intersex. So that's the personal drive that's the personal drive, the need to change the narrative so that we can learn about intersex when we're younger, so that we are aware of intersex people who are around us, and we are aware of our own experiences if they are an intersex experience. But there's also, when I started to connect to community, what became very, very apparent is that because intersex is this big, beautiful umbrella term that encompasses such a diversity of experiences, of identities, of like bodily diversity, different intersex variations. We have this very, very ingrained narrative of medical violence in the intersex community, and a lot of our advocacy is singularly focused on reforming legislation and reforming healthcare for intersex people so that we have better experiences in those environments. But what stood out to me is that for some types of intersex, they don't experience medical intervention in the same way as other people do, and their struggles are in the school environment because of various other struggles with physical development or learning development. So I think that, to me, this represents a really unique opportunity to finally address something that isn't just medical violence and medical intervention. It's an opportunity to address one of the next issues, or one of the larger issues, which it takes my breath away. It really, really does.
Thank you so much, Cody. I think that you're right, that this document is far more than just raising awareness now. It's taking it to the next step of people coming to understand and make a difference for all young people in schools, but especially for people who are intersex. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Cody. Next, I'd like to invite Gabe, who has been instrumental in pulling this magnificent document together. Gabe, can I ask you, first of all, to introduce yourself, but also can you talk to us a little bit about what stood out to you most when you reviewed, when you started making the resource? Please.
Yeah, absolutely. I have the absolute pleasure of working both at Sexual Health Family Planning ACT and with a gender agenda. So I'm a project officer at SHFPACT, and that's sort of been where I've sort of steered this role in developing the resource and co-authoring the resource. But I've also had the extreme pleasure of stepping up into Cody's former role at a gender agenda as the new Intersex Project Coordinator. So it was really quite nice to be able to pull together both workplaces and both amazing workforces and all these great minds that we have to get this resource to where it is today. I was really fortunate in terms of inheriting an idea that had already sort of had a bit of planning prior to my time. So Cody Smith and the person in my role before me, Jen Lewis at SHFPACT, had been sitting on this idea for a while, and it had been ticking away. And over the last sort of 2.5 years, we've really been able to pull together the resource the way that it is now. We started with a really sort of extensive and high level like literature review. We went looking for academic literature around education, around intersex experiences, around lived experiences. I'm also an intersex person. I probably should have led with that. But all of our experiences, just talking anecdotally, there was nothing that we really found in the literature or in any academic sources, in any sort of education resources. So nothing like this really existed. And there was a big gap. Much like Cody, I did not hear anything about intersex in high school. I did go on to study biology at university, which is where it came up for me. But again, that's an extremely privileged position to be getting to a tertiary biology degree to get an understanding of in what it is to be intersex, what it means, any of it at all. And it really should be talked about earlier. It's part of human development. It's part of human sex. And it's part of all the things we do in our puberty education and any sort of talking about biology and diversity. It really needs to include everything and everyone. And we don't serve anyone by presenting a very narrow view of what that is and what that looks like. So for us, really, we acknowledge that there's a really big gap in the research, and I really wanted to write something to fill that gap. And thanks to all the incredible people here today, we've got it ready to go.
Thanks, Gabe. Can you tell us a little bit more about the content of the document, please?
Absolutely. I'd love to give everyone a little sort of quick overview through the document. So it is a 40-page document, so we won't go too in detail, but I'll just give you an overview of the kind of thing that we have in there. So everyone should be able to see that now. This is our lovely cover image. And we'll just go through. So these are the table of contents, so it's really easy to navigate. We've got the preface section where it has all the background about how we developed it, who was involved, a few notes on some of the content, and a little bit of history and that sort of thing as well. Cody Smith has written this incredible piece that I recommend that everyone reads for our foreword about their experiences at school. We've got a little section just to navigate how to use the guide and all of that sort of thing. But in terms of like the content, this is where we start to get into it here. So we've got a whole introduction and background section for anyone that wants to know a little bit more about what intersex is, what it means, a little about the history, who we're talking about as a population, some of our experiences and some of the particular experiences around medical intervention and the impacts that this has on individuals. We've also done a little bit of a myth busting and a debunking in this sort of section as well. So it's really good to just orient you to the kind of content that we're talking about. Next, we move into a section just about specifically intersex within a school and an education environment. And it sort of orients the reader about why is it important in these educational settings and how does this actually fit in the school environment. The next section is, I'd say, the meat of the resource. This is where we go through one by one and address some of the key issues and the key barriers facing intersex young people at school. So we have a look here at some of the main barriers faced right from the beginning of enrolment and school uniform admin processes, accessibility in terms of the disability lens particularly, absence from school for medical intervention. So we talk all about that in the previous section, but it's a really common experience for intersex people to have to miss large chunks of school to go to specialists and doctors, and that is really disruptive to the education experience for them. Inclusive curriculum, which is the stuff we talked about not hearing about us at school, not hearing about our bodies and our experiences, and even knowing that we exist and that it's a natural part of human biology, that we're out there, and the impact that also has for young people. And we've also got a section on bullying and harassment, which is an unfortunate experience for intersex people. In each of these sections, we not only talk about the issue, but we also talk about some actions for change, some ways to address this and some ways to manage this in a school environment. And it does a really, really good job of just providing a bit of a look and an examination about how we make that a more equitable experience for intersex people at school. We've also got a section on creating these inclusive environments. It's all well and good to say you need an inclusive environment. We've just provided some really practical steps and some considerations to do that. And again, with our appendix information, there is a lot of resources in there about community organisations, other places to go if you've got more questions and further reading. And then we've got our references, which is they're all great reads on their own. If anyone wants to know anything more, that's absolutely in the resource section.
Thanks so much, Gabe. Just while you've got the document there, I just wonder if you would mind just maybe going to one of the sections that highlights the use of intersex voices, because I think that was the real strength of the document, and just maybe talk to why you've made that choice.
Absolutely. So throughout the document, we've included some work and quotes and examples from the research in 2016 of Dr. Tiffany Jones. This is probably the exception to the rule when we said that there was a gap in the academic references and resources. And this is really the only resource that was Australian and that spoke to school experiences in education. From this, there was a lot of quotes, a lot of examples, a lot of stories shared from intersex people. And being intersex myself and having lots of intersex people involved in the development and production of this resource is excellent, but what I really wanted to do was actually center the lived experience and the voices of other intersex people and bring as many people into the conversation as we could. This research exists and is out there, and for intersex people, it's really important that when we are research, that the research doesn't go and sit on a shelf somewhere and become stale. So I really wanted to just bring this to the forefront. So throughout the actual document, we've got these little bubbles here that you can see with intersex voices, and they're actual quotes from people from this research from Tiffany Jones, talking about their lived experiences, their actual experiences of school in Australia. And I agree that's really central and critical to this, this work, and reading them can be challenging and thought-provoking and distressing, and I think they need to be all of those things. Everyone really to see and hear how people are actually impacted in their own words is really, really powerful.
I agree so much. Thank you, Gabe. A real shout out to you and for Alex Thatcher from SHFPACT for making the document just look so amazing and making it so readable. I think that schools, all the school communities are going to really engage so well with this document. So thank you. Steph, can I move on to you now, please? Can you also introduce yourself and then maybe have a little chat to us about what stood out to you the most when you reviewed the resource, please?
Thanks, yeah. My name's Steph Lum. I'm an intersex advocate and founder and editor-in-chief of Youth and I, which is an intersex youth creative journal. I'm an independent peer reviewer of this resource, and I was delighted to be asked. So I was brought in the later stages to review the publication and was just blown away by how new this is and how different it is. You know, reading the resource really, it honestly felt like it had come from another world. Like everything in the document expressed ideas and approaches which are so different to my experience of being intersex through schooling. In particular, you know, the focus on student-centered approaches is so important, and the recognition that not all intersex people are the same or have the same needs is really crucial, since they'll, of course, present in different ways and have different challenges in school. And I think there was also did a really good job at challenging the idea that many people might think, well, I don't know anyone who is intersex, none of my students probably are, so it's not relevant to teach, but you do, they just haven't told you, or they may not even know themselves yet. Just assume there are intersex people in your classroom and people you're working with, and work to include an understanding of intersex in schools, because it's not just something that doesn't impact you or the school, it's actually impacting the school and the students every day. And it's just hard to see it if you're not looking and you don't know what to look for. So this including intersex was also perfectly helps to direct that attention on what to look for and the practical steps to accommodate it as well. And I also found the concept and the explanation of the concepts of the curriculum so helpful, the idea of formal, hidden, and the null curriculum in articulating some of the problems with choosing not to talk about some of these issues. So I found it really fascinating, that idea of the null curriculum and how it really reflects silencing. And it's beyond just forgetting to mention something. It's when the concept of intersex and all the issues around it are never raised or spoken about, you often assume that you can't ask about it and there's a taboo around it. Or even if you wanted to ask about it, because it's never been raised, you actually don't have the words to talk about it because you haven't heard the words. You don't have the language to think about it or question it. And instead you just feel like there's something different or something going on that's unspeakable, which of course then reinforces shame, stigma, and all of those other issues. So I think this resource did a really great job in articulating that problem.
Thank you so much, Steph. I agree. It seems extraordinary in 2021 that we're having this discussion, but it is absolutely timely and such a credit to everyone involved that we've been able to make something so clear and so absolutely able to describe in words that teachers can understand, and that they will be able to then go back to their students and implement this in their classrooms straight away. So thank you so much, Steph. Sel, can I pass over to you now? Thank you so much for coming today. And I know this has been a project long in coming. So would you like to just introduce yourself, but also tell us a little bit about how the Including Intersex resource fits with your work in the Canberra community?
Thank you. Sorry about that. I guess I wanted to thank Aunty Violet for the welcome also, and acknowledge that AGA is also on Ngunnawal country and the privilege that we have to be on this country. My name is Sel Cooper. I'm the Executive Director of Gender Agenda. And I guess my role in this work was to be part of the collaboration and really just to support our amazing workers to do the thing that they do best. So yeah, I guess that's part of what I've been able to do, is just being able to support in this amazing process. So I guess what I wanted to say about the work is I feel like this has been a really good example of how respectful collaboration can really work when community organisations are really committed to listening to each other and to build trust and long-term relationships to address these sorts of challenges in our community. So for me, I feel like this is a good example of coming together and sharing resources and skills, I guess, to achieve a great outcome. So a very important part of the development of this resource, I guess, for me, it's not only the resource itself, but the process and the time that it's taken to develop such a resource. And AGA and SHFPACT have a trusting and honest relationship, I think, which has enabled respectful listening, which has been fundamental in this process to occur from both organisations. And this listening has been fundamental in the development of resources, I think, which can and are very sensitive at times, not just for the reader, but definitely for the people who have developed them. So most importantly, this process needed to be supported and led and informed by those who have lived experiences in this space. This resource is enormously generous. It's an enormously generous piece of work that is privileged with the lived experiences of intersex people who have given their time and their energy, and people who themselves too at times I know have suffered but have been willing to share their stories for a better future for others. So this resource will bring a great deal of depth and richness to the work that AGA has been doing more intensely over the last several years here in Canberra. We do have contacts with schools and we talk with young people and we talk to many parents. So, you know, this resource is incredibly valuable to all the work that we do. Intersex has been front and centre of our strategic plan, and increasing awareness of the intersex experiences will need to be continued and be a priority of our work. So this document will greatly support the work we will continue to do in this space and to make hopefully help to make intersex people more visible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sel. It is SHFPACT's great honour to work and learn from all of your team, and I guess a special shout out to Gabe, who wears the two hats across both organisations so beautifully, and yes, was able to then drive this work forward. So again, Sel. Tim, I'd like to throw to you, last but not least. Can you tell us a little bit about why was SHFPACT involved in the developing of the Intersex resource, please?
Thanks, Sheridan, and thank you all. I'd also like to say thanks to Aunty Violet for her welcome to country, and to also acknowledge any Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people who are also intersex who are out listening to this launch as well, to acknowledge you. It's really amazing, as Sel said, to be able to support our amazing team and you know, a broader community of advocates and support workers to give prime place to the experience and the voice of intersex people in the shaping of a resource like this. So for Sexual Health and Family Planning ACT, where I'm CEO, of course, it aligns with work we've been doing for a long time. We've been delivering health education and health promotion in school communities. We've worked on anti-discrimination, especially around diversity in sex, gender and sexuality for decades. And we do a lot of teacher professional development as well. So we were really aware that there was a gap of resource that talked to the schooling and education experiences of intersex people. That was drawn to our attention through our relationships with AGA, with Cody, with our workers on the team like Jen, like Gabe, those connections. And because Canberra's a really amazing little community, of course, we had some great advocates that we could draw on, like Steph, to invite to be a reviewer. So it speaks really very much to the vibe of the Canberra community as well, that a resource like this can be generated out of those existing connections. At SHFPACT, we've also spent the last few years in parallel to the development of this resource, reviewing our own education programs to figure out how they can be more inclusive of intersex diversity and other kinds of diversity in our community as well. especially with things like our puberty education programs, which you'll read in the resource is one of the times when intersex people may become aware of their intersex variation for the first time. And we want to make sure that we are inclusive of that experience without turning every education session into a session only about intersex variation. So this resource comes out of that kind of practical work that we've been doing alongside its development from the research and lived experience space as well. We wanted to work with AGA because we've enjoyed working with AGA over many, many years. And we know that it's an issue that's poorly understood, poorly framed, and that we wanted to try to give some clarity and confidence and comfort for people in the front line, in classrooms, in school communities, providing support to students, those who support families, and everyone else, who needs to know about intersex in their context, but with a particular focus on schools because that's where there's such a gap. When we look at gender diversity, there's, in the last decade, a lot of materials and resources talking about that in the school environment. When, as Gabe said, we did the literature review right up front for this, there was almost nothing talking about intersex experience in the context of school. So the resource itself helps us to do all of those jobs that are so important to our organisation and our contribution in our community. And it's a really great privilege to have been able to, not just with our local community, but also with some of the national advocacy and support organisations, to give that primacy of voice and position to intersex people in its development.
Thank you so much, Tim. Just to wrap up now, I'd just really like to thank everyone who's been along, and to really summarise, I'd like to read a short piece from page 26, if I may, Gabe, read some of the author's work for them, and to really say the power that this document is going to have. Everyone will encounter intersex people at some point in their lives, at school or in their social circles. They may befriend an intersex person or meet intersex people later in life through work or hobbies. They may also have or come to have intersex relatives, or one day have a partner or child who's intersex. Every student at every school can benefit from a more accurate, holistic and well-rounded understanding of bodies, biology and human diversity through the inclusion of intersex topics in the curriculum. And this has a direct positive influence on self-esteem and heightened appreciation of diversity of all of us, peers and in their community. We cannot emphasise enough that for intersex students particularly, the benefit of these inclusive, affirmative and positive representations will have a profound effect on their well-being. And this inclusion ultimately normalises and destigmatises their experiences. Effective, positive, diverse education will encompass this and create a solid foundation for respectful relationships that are just aware of diverse bodies. And this is just a fantastic way to help young people understand their own human rights, and is a way to empower them moving forward. So thank you all so much for your contributions to this wonderful document. We look forward to sending it out into the world and knowing that this is the start of an ongoing conversation. Thanks everyone for your time today, and see you again soon.
Happy Intersex Awareness Day.
Hurrah!